The Memory of Love, Chapter 20. Some names he knows. Lamin says he worked coloring Easter eggs in a factory in Germany. He uses the occasional German word, Frohus, Austria, diagnosed with dissocial personality disorder. Attila does not believe Lamin has ever been to Germany. Iliana tells Adrian, Lamin is making progress. Attila has allowed him to be unshackled from his bed. The chains remain around his ankles and wrists. Lamin shambles around in the sunlight. The mass of his chains gathered up and looped over one arm, like a bright string. He raises his free hand in salute to Adrian. In the bed next to Lamin is Kapua. Adrian has read his notes, paid a bowl of rice in exchange for 12 hours a day in a diamond pit. In the evenings, the men curbed their hunger with ganja. The mines were overrun by rebel soldiers, who worked them just as hard for less food. Kapua escaped, but left his mind behind. His family brought a healer to wash him and recite prayers once a week. His violent outbursts frightened his family, who kept him chained to a bamboo pole in the yard. Bobo occupies the bed in the center of the ward. Bobo is mentally retarded and epileptic. He turns his back to Adrian and bends over, waving his backside, which Adrian can see plainly through the rent in Bobo's trousers. Adrian pretends to be horrified. Bobo laughs and claps. The other patients complain Bobo is crazy. Adrian suspects Bobo is less demented than he would have others believe. And then there is the professor, one in every asylum, thinks Adrian. The mentally retarded and the brilliant together in madness. The professor is a maniac depressive, the walls around whose bed are covered in chalked words, poetic, nonsensical, obscene. The father of one of the new patients, a religious man, has complained. The professor does not wear chains and has the freedom of the grounds. Adrian recognizes him as the man he spoke to at the front gate that first morning. These four are long-term residents. Then there are the others who come and go. They lie in bed all day, sleeping or in various stages of withdrawal. At night, the sound of their deliriums upsets the other patients. Occasionally, there is a ruckus. Many of them were once fighters who faced each other as enemies. Now they lie side by side. The young man Adrian brought is one of them. They come and go, come and go. Today, Lisa had called in the early morning to remind him of Kate's 11 plus exam. Adrian hung up and called back after 10 minutes to speak to Kate. If his daughter was at all nervous, it had not shown. It's very sweet of you to call Daddy, a careful, conservative child, 6 pounds at birth, petite and china fragile. Lisa had stayed home to look after her for the first year, and then a second, then a third, after which all talk of returning to work had ceased. Sometimes it seemed to Adrian he had difficulty telling where his wife ended and his daughter began, as if birth had failed to separate them. Secretly, he wished Lisa would go back to work. Meanwhile, Kate had grown into a child measured in thought and deed, whose transition to adulthood looked seamless, with none of the messy mistakes other children suffered. On the telephone, Adrian wished Kate luck. He was just about to tell her about the sunbird when she interrupted him. I'd better go now, so I shan't be late. At times her poise unsettled him, as though she found his efforts wanting. It had not always been so. When Kate was 2, she'd been prone to nightmares and would insist he, not Lisa, sit by her bed until she went back to sleep. Later, he would watch her sleep, wondering what such a tiny creature could possibly be dreaming about. On the way through town, he'd bought several packets of biscuits from a roadside seller. He gives them now to Kapua, who takes them to a table in the middle of the room, allotting them carefully among the residents of the ward. Those who can step forward do so quietly to receive their share. Kapua carries biscuits over to the chained men. Lamin shambles in. The whole affair is conducted with solemnity and in silence. Kapua moving along the line of banks. The men raising both chained hands to receive the biscuits, followed by a nod of or grant of thanks. Adrian wonders what it reminds him of, then realizes Kapua looks like a priest giving communion. And afterwards, passing through the ward, he no longer notices the smell, the sound of his footsteps reassuringly solid. Adrian feels happier than he has in many weeks, months, years. Today, she is dressed in a patterned blue lapper and a t-shirt bearing a picture of a dolphin. The t-shirt is too big for her and slips from one shoulder, a slender bone to which flesh and skin cling. Her feet are bare, 43, 2 years older than Adrian, the same age as Lisa. Adrian thinks of the fine lines on Lisa's skin. Agnes's face is unblemished. She weighs no more than a girl. She could be 20 or she could be 60. The years are carried not upon her body, but in the light of her eyes. Today, too, another development. Salia, who must have been waiting for him to arrive, intercepted him within yards of the gate and handed him a gold chain. So, she sits facing him, her forearm on the armrest of the chair. This time, she looks less often at Sally. She is calm. Her voice contains little inflection or emotion. Adrian has less trouble understanding. Time spent helping Ileana with her rounds in the hospital has familiarized him to accents and patterns of the language. Agnes, she was born and married, she tells him, in a town to the north of the city. Her husband worked at the government agricultural project, raising different varieties of fruits and vegetables. Dwarf bananas, whose seed equaled and even surpassed the ordinary ones. Pawpaws, larger than the local variety. Guavas, limes, tomatoes, and vegetables. He kept a few seeds back for her, and she grew them on her own plot at the back of the house and traded them in the market. In time, she began to carry them to the city once a week to sell outside the supermarket to white women. She bore 5 children, of whom 2 returned. Both were boys. The girls all survived: Nasu, Yalie, Marian. Nasu, the eldest, was a helpful child and clever. When she passed her school certificate, they gave her a party with sweets and drinks of colored water. As soon as she finished with school, Nasu got a job at the department store in the city. By then, a bag of rice had become so much more expensive, and some months too, Agnes's husband's salary at the government nurseries went unpaid. Sometimes, Agnes visited Nasu at the store on days when she went into town to sell her produce. Nasu would leave the counter where she sold cosmetics and take her to the place she and the other girls had lunch. One place in particular called the Red Rooster. Agnes enjoyed herself, although it seemed wrong to spend money on food cooked by somebody else. They ate the food out of paper boxes. Afterwards, Agnes would collect up the boxes and take them home. Though Nasu laughed and tried to persuade her to leave them, other times Nasu brought home tiny bottles of perfume she said were for giving out to the customers. Agnes saved them too, wear on special occasions. Ah, Nasu looked so fine in the clothes she wore to work. Though Alfred didn't like the way she painted her face, Nasu explained she must wear the cosmetics herself so that the customers could see how they looked. However, in deference to her face, she left home with her face bare. She had to pay for the cosmetics out of her own money. For some reason, this knowledge appeased Alfred. Agnes had never been inside the shop during opening hours, but there were times Nasu let her in through the back after the store was closed. She walked through the empty halls, gazing at the displays, the imported fabrics, the shoes with long narrow heels, the pale dummies with pink pouting mouths. She touched them all, except the dummies, which for some reason frightened her. Nasu laughed and showed her the story, where the disembodied arms and legs were stacked in piles. Another time, a bird flew in. It swooped through the wide windows from hall to hall and perched on the shoulder of a mannequin. Nasu no longer works at the store, Agnes tells him. She herself has not been back to the store for many years. She is not dissembling. This Adrian can see. In turn, he doesn't contradict her, but says, "Tell me about the first trip you made, the first one you remember making that you did not plan to make." It was maybe a year ago, Hamilton time again. It began in the same way as everyone, since with dreams so real she could not escape them. She woke in the morning with the soles of her feet dirty. She must have gone out of the house to use the toilet and forgotten her slippers, though she had no memory of doing so. The dreams brought on a headache, and she remembered waking in the morning with a blood patch in the center of her vision. Then suddenly everything turned black, leaving only a circle of light. She sent the girl out to buy medicine. Because Nasu wasn't at home, she had traveled to the wedding of a classmate in another town. She had been gone for 2 days and was not due for 2 more. All that morning, Agnes had a strong sense something was about to happen. She went to the door to see if the girl was on her way back from the pharmacy. But even after the child had returned, Agnes found herself racing to go and check at the door, over and over. She forced herself to sit down. Anxiety beat in her breast like a bird's wing, like the bird trapped in the department store. Still, she could not stay in the chair for long. She called the child to come, and they set about preparing the evening meal. The pressure in Agnes's skull was joined by a sound like the rushing of air. Her own voice, as she gave instructions to the child, sounded like somebody else calling from another room. She wished Nasu was home. She tried to block out the sounds and concentrate on what she was doing. But all the time, she felt as if she were dreaming, as if standing there cooking with the child, watching her hands slicing meat, was all part of the dream. She does not remember leaving the house. Later, the child described what happened. Agnes had sent her on an errand in the afternoon into town to buy food for Nasu's return. The child did as she was bid. She was standing at the market when she saw Agnes hurrying in the direction of the main road. The girl thought maybe Nasu was coming back early and Agnes was going to meet the bus. Nasu found Agnes 5 days later. She followed her mother's footsteps, asking people in every village. In one town, somebody, a niece by marriage, had recognized Agnes and spoken to her, but Agnes seemed not to remember her. She pointed Natu in the direction Agnes had taken. Agnes remembers fragments from those days, but she cannot tell Adrian whether those things truly occurred or were part of her dreams. She remembers taking a foot road, seeing the dust from a whirlwind ahead of her, spinning away. One night, she slept in a farm worker's house. Another day, she watched the clouds moving across the sky and noticed they were both heading in the same direction. But when Nasu asked her where she had been going, she could not say. She was 40 miles from the place they both lived. After Nasu brought her home, Agnes slept for 2 whole days. Agnes reaches the end of her account. She sits facing Adrian, who in turn regards her in silence. He is right. He knows he is right. Everything she had told him today supports his notion. He would not dare to make a diagnosis at this early stage. But nonetheless, he is sure of himself in a way he has rarely had occasion to before. From under the sheets of paper, Adrian draws the gold chain Salia had given him and hands it to Agnes. "Thank you," she says courteously. "It is yours then?" "Yes, this is the one I lost in the war. I thought maybe it had been stolen." Adrian inclined his head. He is aware of Salia watching. Adrian doesn't tell Agnes what Salia has told him, that the chain had been brought by the man from the old department store, who'd redeemed it from a pawnbroker one of the many who sat with weight scales and jewelers' loops in the street outside the store. Agnes herself had pawned it. Sunday lunchtime. Adrian has managed to borrow a vehicle to go to Iliana's for lunch. It is the first time he has been behind the wheel of a car in weeks, and he sets off, uncertain at first. The Land Cruiser is much lighter than anything he has handled, as well as being left-handed and driven. It takes his hands and feet time to recover the memory of driving. Soon he is moving at speed, savoring the mood of independence. He drives in the opposite direction to the instructions Iliana has given him, towards the city, through the dense throng at the roundabout. The heat is rising. He is grateful for the air conditioning, both for the cool and the insulating effect from the dust and noise on the other side of the glass. He turns the wheel of the vehicle to the left and the traffic eases up. On the right is an open stretch of ground, a golf course. Directly ahead, he can see the sea. The road swings around to the right and Adrian follows it, driving the full length of the beach. Here, there is no traffic at all. He turns off the air conditioning and winds down the windows, lets the breeze touch his face. At the far end, he doubles back at another roundabout. When he reaches the left turn at the end, he sees a small road he had missed when he had come from the other direction. Behind a pair of concrete pillars, a crescent driveway curves under the arch of a building. Adrian turns in and drives to the car park at the back, descends and makes his way across the uneven tarmac to the building. 3 steps lead up to a fountain, an art deco figure of a girl, held tilted back, outstretched arms holding aloft a torch. A trickle of water from the torch runs down the girl's arms and belly into a small pool of green at her feet, from which a scab-eared dog laps. Behind her, a sign painted upon the wall in faded letters, Ocean Club, patrons only. Parquet floors, bleached and water-stained, a few blocks missing in places. Adrian reaches the top of the short flight of stairs. On one side of the vast space, a horseshoe bar. Ahead, clusters of tables and chairs. To the right, a sweeping dance floor, capable of holding 100 couples or more. Morning sun and shadow shimmer on the tabletops. The walls, the stilled ceiling fans. On the far side of the dance floor, the building is entirely open to the seafront. All is quiet, save for the sound of the waves. There is nobody inside as he wanders across the dance floor, feeling strangely vulnerable as he always does, crossing an empty dance floor, as though at any moment he might hear a drum roll or the clash of cymbals, or find himself suddenly illuminated by a spotlight. On the beach, a score of translucent crabs scuttle from his shadow. Down by the water, tiny seabirds, sandpipers, follow the movement of the waves, scurrying after the retreating water, inspecting the sand for whatever has been left in its wake, hurrying back as the water advances. Detectives scanning the beach for evidence, wings like hands clasped self-importantly behind backs. Adrian is tempted to remove his shoes and socks and walk down to the water, but the practicalities are off-putting, so he heads instead for the bar, pulling up one of the old stools to sit on. Within moments, a man appears. "Yes, sir. Beer, please." "It is only 11. "What the hell?" The barman opens a bottle and slides the beer down the inside of a tilted glass. He flips beer mat, places the glass upon it and pushes it towards Adrian, who takes a sip, enjoying the bite of the cold beer at the back of his throat. The man goes away and comes back with a stainless steel dish of peanuts. They are tiny, delicious, with salty pink pepper skins, a fragment of which gets caught in Adrian's throat, forcing him to cough and cough again. "Be careful, sir." "Yes, thank you." Adrian drains his glass, but is left still coughing. Another beer, please. First time here, says the waiter, as he pours the second bottle. Yes, it's a question he has grown to dislike. He feels patronized, a new arrival, wait behind the gills, particularly if the questionnaire is another Westerner. And how do you find us here? Adrian nods. I like it very much. The bartender nods gravely, as though this is as he would have expected. He replies, maybe you will tell others, and then they will come. Adrian drinks his beer. The barman departs and returns with a basin of ice, which he positions on a shelf beneath the bar. Actually, says Adrian, I already knew a bit about the country from my grandfather. This is not strictly true, and he is not quite sure why he says it. Perhaps because he is tired of being treated like a beginner. The barman looks up. Your grandfather was here? Yes, says Adrian, a long time ago, before the war. He was a district commissioner. What was his name, your grandfather? Silk. District Commissioner Silk, yes. Neither the barman's tone or voice nor his expression convey a thing, not even whether he recognized the name or is merely politely concurring. Adrian finishes his beer. By the time he comes to pay, the barman has gone again. He counts the money and looks around for the man, noticing for the first time a poster on a pillar behind him. He slips from the tool for a closer look. Mambo Blues, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. First Monday of the month at the Ocean Club. There is an image of a woman's face, partly in profile. It looks like the woman he saw outside the hospital, talking to Babagali. The angle of the photograph makes it hard to be certain. Adrian looks around for the barman, but there is still no sign of him, so he places the correct money on the counter and leaves. The road to Iliana's house is straight, and the distance no more than a few miles. Nevertheless, it takes Adrian 30 minutes to drive there because of the road's treacherous condition. Two dogs, collarless and slender, lie by the road. One of them cautiously sniffs Adrian's hand as he waits for Iliana to answer his knock. Through the fly screen, he can see the living room. All rattan sofa, coffee table, books, bright shelves cover the furniture. On the wall, a mirror bordered by a mosaic frame, sharp fragments of glass. There is piano music playing. In time, he sees Iliana cross the sitting room, smoking a cigarette. As he watches, she performs a few steps of a dance. Her lips are pale, bare of lipstick. She does not see him. Adrian waits until she is out of sight before knocking a second time. This time, Iliana appears down the short passage and briskly throws open the fly screen. The door is open. You should have come in. She smiles and kisses him on each of his cheeks, stands back and regards him for a moment, like a mother looking to see how much her son has grown. Her lips are dark red, freshly painted. Welcome. The house, a compact bungalow, sits squarely on the beach. Iliana goes to the kitchen and returns with a cold beer for Adrian. If this was my place, I'd knock down all the walls and keep it as one space, like a studio, she says. It's great. He removes his shoes, slides open the screen and steps onto springy grass and sand. How did you find it? It was leased by a mining company for their foreign workers to take weekend breaks. I took it over at a bargain rent. You could say there was a bit of a glut in the property market at that time. Iliana laughs. You'd never get something like this now, and not at that price. All the ones along this stretch are rented for a fortune to one NGO or another. She places a pair of plastic chairs and they sit, enjoying for a few moments a companionable silence and the sound of the sea. A group are walking up the beach against the sun. 3 fat sailboats and 3 thin. Each of the fat figures appears conjoined to a thin one. As they approach, Adrian sees that they are 3 men, each with a young black girl. The girl seemed exceptionally young, narrow and pretty. Ileana and Adrian watch them pass. How differently we behave in other people's countries, says Ileana. She raises her beer bottle to her lip. It just goes to show. Show what? No sooner than we think we can get away with it, we do as we please. It doesn't require the breakdown of a social order. It takes a 6-hour plane flight. I see what you mean. Adrian watches the receding figures. Here and there, groups of bathers sit on the sand or under the umbrella. Children move between them, selling peanuts and fruit. I hope you like crab, says Ileana. They carry salad plates and cutlery outside. There is fried rice and a bottle of cold white wine. Ileana throws a pair of giant crabs on top of a coal pot, where they pop and sizzle. While they eat, Adrian talks to Ileana about Agnes, of the progress she is making. She's still pretty confused though. That's improving. A few days ago, she couldn't recognize herself in a mirror. Now she's able to hold a conversation. There are gaps, but my guess is that in a few days she'll be back to herself. And the journeys, so far as I know, they started after the war, not before. That much seems clear. I need to find the truth. I'm working on the premise that something occurred during the war. You think she's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder? That's what I'm looking at, Adrian says carefully. Adrian is aware of Ileana's steady gaze upon him. He can't fool her. She knows exactly what's in his mind. If he's right, he will have achieved something considerable. To prove the existence of Ogoe in a population would be a professional coup. But if he could also demonstrate a clear link to post-traumatic stress disorder, well, that could make his name. Moving on, he tells Ileana about the gold chain, how they had got to the bottom of that particular mystery. Agnes had pawned it and forgotten. Dissociation, says Ileana, standing up. She does things she can't remember doing. More wine? Yes, please, says Adrian. He looks out at the horizon. In his mind, he replays the second interview with Agnes, during which she'd complained about the theft of her gold chain. This followed the night Salia had been forced to sedate her. Adrian had prompted Agnes into recalling the events leading up to her most recent journey. She'd mentioned her daughter had been away. And again, in the last interview when they had talked about her first journey, the daughter had been away from home that time too. With this realization, his heart skips a bit. He leans forward in the chair, peruses the connection he has just made. It cannot simply be a coincidence. Nasu is the only daughter she talks about. He'd already noted that. The journeys occur when Nasu is away from home. He exhales and leans back in his chair. He can hardly wait to interview Agnes again. He must be careful not to rush her. What had they been talking about when she brought up the gold chain again? He asked her who was in the house with her. He mentioned the girl, her son-in-law. He ponders whether there is meaning in that. Suddenly, switches of subject were sometimes a marker of a patient wanting to avoid something. The subconscious steered them away. Ileana returns with the wine. It could take a long time, she says, continuing their earlier conversation. I mean, for you to discover the trigger, if there is one. Years of investigation, therapy, and even then, there are no guarantees. After all, it was us Europeans who invented the talking cure, and most of the maladies is diagnosed to treat. She nods faintly. There are other ways, says Adrian. Like what? Hypnosis? Yes. Have you ever tried it? No, replies Ileana. I don't know about Attila would make of it. I think it's a bit early in the game. Of course, concedes Adrian. It was just a thought. Ileana stands and scrapes the contents of one plate to the other. The debris of crab shells and empty clothes. Out at sea, a fishing canoe sits high upon the shallow waves. A line of buoys marks the shape of the net. Ileana is in the kitchen. Two women are walking along the beach. One of them waves at Adrian. A moment later, she waves again. Politely, Adrian waves back, thinking she must have mistaken him for somebody else. The woman changed direction and came up the beach towards him. Here, says the one who waved. She is tall, her shoulders almost as broad as his, an athlete's body, blonde hair and prominent teeth. Her companion is shorter, small-breasted though with a good figure, reddish hair and a red bikini, the pale skin of a true redhead. Hello, says Adrian, shielding his eyes against the sun as he looks up at them. We saw you and thought we'd come and say hello. Pedro's a couple of weeks ago. His accent is American. Of course, Adrian replies. He recognizes her now as the woman from the bar the evening he drank beers with Kai. Kai had given her the brush off, though she hadn't seemed to mind. Been having a good day, absolutely. Isn't the beach great? But there are others that are even better, with some great beach bars. Well, if you can call them that. Of course, it takes them forever to bring the food, and half the time they don't have what you order. But then, isn't that the same every place? You get used to it. The lobster is $2, the far, and just about $2 for a whole one. Can't get that at home. Some guy dives from the rocks for fresh oysters while you wait. They are $1 a dozen. She sits in Ileana's chair. Have you tried the Shangri-La? This is my first day out at the beach. You are kidding. By the way, I'm Candy. This is Ellen. They are both in the country working for aid agencies. In turn, Adrian tells him about his position at the hospital. So, this isn't your place then? No. Adrian mentions Ileana. Candy shrugs and shakes her head. Two men selling sarongs and souvenirs approach and begin to display their wares. Batik clothes, hematite necklaces, and glossy carved animals. One of the men is in his 50s, the other in his 20s, shirtless with a smooth, muscular chest. Neither Candy nor Ellie pays attention to the men or their wares. Elle sits on the sand and, turning her back on them, rolls over onto her stomach on the sand. As she does so, she reaches down to adjust her bikini bottom, flicking the elastic. There is no self-consciousness in the gesture, as if the men behind her don't exist. Candy is still talking. Adrian looks at her, remembers the expression on her face the night she had approached Kai. Self-confident, hungry. He thanks the two men, tells them they are not interested in buying. Don't bother, they never give up, says Candy. So how long have you been here? For the second time that day, Adrian is asked the question. He tells them, and Candy laughs. I thought you looked saner than the rest of us. And she laughs again. I'm sorry? You haven't heard the joke, says Candy, flicking a look at her. Adrian shakes his head bemused. You know the joke about the tourist? He still has no idea what she is talking about. What's the difference between a tourist and a racist? I don't know, he responds automatically. 2 weeks. Ellie laughs supportively, though she has clearly heard the joke before. Candy is grinning at him. Adrian has no idea how to respond. He is silent. Behind Candy, the sellers are folding sarongs, putting them away. Adrian thinks of the obtuse police officers and the deaf boy. His frustration with the hospital administrator, the power cuts and water shortages, the heat, the clogged gutters and traffic jams in the city. The beggars. He thinks of the pregnant woman with the dead baby between her legs, of Kai, then of Agnes, of the young man he first brought to the hospital, of his friends among the patients at the hospital, the calm and beauty of the patient's garden, of Attila's unbroken determination, of his own strange happiness in that place. He is still unsure what to say when he realizes the attention of both women has been redirected. Oh, hi, Candy says, in a tone noticeably flatter to the one with which she had greeted Edwin. Ileana has reappeared with a dish of sliced fruit, mango and pineapple. She greets the two women and sets the plate down on the table. Hey, that looks great, Candy says, her tone gushing now. And this place too. Thank you, I'll get some more plates. To Adrian's relief, the moment has passed. He wonders if Ileana had Candy's job, though if she did, she gives no sign of it. Disappearing for a second time, he reemerges with extra plates and cutlery. The fruit is fresh, sharp and clean, clears his taste buds of that residual flavor of crab. Suddenly, Ileana sets her plate back on the table and stands up. I'm so sorry, she says to the woman. You don't have anything to drink. What would you like? There's wine. Hey, awesome, we've lucked out here. Could a day get any better? Ileana nods graciously. She takes the bottle from the cool box beside Adrian and pours 2 more glasses. This is really good, LL this time. Do you know what the most popular white one here is? Asked Ileana. No? Says Candy and turned to her. Adrian as well. The two women open-faced, smiling. It goes like this, says Liana, and she affects a grating, high-pitched voice, a clear imitation of Candy's nasal accent. Christ, what's wrong with these people? Can they do anything for themselves? If it wasn't for us, they'd still be in the trees. And with that, she sits down heavily in her chair, takes a sip from her own glass. Cheers. Good, isn't it? The most popular white wine. That night, it turns cold. There is no wind, no rain, and yet, lying in his bed, Adrian feels a chill in the air. He gets up from his bed and switches off the ceiling fan. The movement sets his stomach churning. The crab, perhaps, though it had tasted fresh enough. With these things, one seldom knew until it was too late. And yet, if his memory serves, seafood poisoning came on quickly. He calculates how long it has been since he left Ileana's. About 5 hours. Candy and Ella had stayed only a few minutes after Ileana's remarks. Silly stats, she'd said as they watched the two women walk away. Do you know how much they get as a hardship allowance? Fortunately, the tension caused by the women's visit had vanished with them. Adrian and Ileana once more at ease between themselves. He had admired the sharpness of her response and felt grateful for her apparent willingness to overlook the failure of his own. They had swum. The shock of the water, the warmth rather than the cold dispelling any awkwardness resulting from seeing each other, two professional colleagues in their swimwear. Ileana, hair tucked up inside a tight rubber cap, turned out to be a strong, serious swimmer and a match for Adrian. They had both cut through the soapy water for 50 yards and stayed there, riding the ebb and flow of the waves. As the sun went down, and afterwards, they'd walked down the beach, where Ileana had shown Adrian a hotel deserted since the war. There was the bar, the card tables, torn, felt and broken glass, as though a wind had blown through them. Later, Adrian had driven home through the rapidly gathering dusk, not wanting to test his driving skills in the dark. He arrived exhausted and with the beginnings of a headache, had drunk some water and gone soon to bed, to wake a few hours later to this unsensational coolness. The cotton sheet, which he usually pushes from his body during the night, is not enough. He searches the cupboards, finds a blanket, and lies back down, pulling the stiff, stale wool up around his shoulders. Dawn finds him shivering. Far away, he hears the key turn in the door, wonders what Kai is doing here so early. He pulls the blanket around his body and stumbles to the bedroom door. Hey man, says Kai, how's the morning? Adrian tries to answer. His voice emerges weakly. He sees Kai turn to look more closely, take a few steps toward him. Standing there, Adrian feels the sweat rising, seeping from his pores, bringing with it a flash of heat. He pushes the blanket away. Suddenly he is thirsty. He puts out a hand to steady himself. Kai is in front of him, blocking his way, his hands on his shoulder, peering into his face. "Whoa, man," he hears Kai's voice distantly. "Man, you are sick."